Joseph Granada's hand shook as he lifted his coffee cup. Not from fear, but from the bone-deep tiredness that comes from working too hard for too long. He sat alone in the corner booth of Romano's diner, staring at the burger he'd ordered as a small treat to himself, though part of him felt guilty for spending the money. The place was half empty on this Tuesday evening. Just the usual hum of quiet conversations and the clink of dishes being cleared. But then the front door opened and 4 men in expensive black suits walked in with the kind of confidence that changes the air in a room. Joseph felt it immediately, that shift from ordinary to dangerous, the way you sense a storm coming before the first drop of rain falls. Before we continue, please tell us where in the world you're watching from. We love seeing how far our stories travel, and it proves that powerful stories resonate everywhere. Joseph Martinez was a 38-year-old construction worker who looked much older than his age. His wife Rebecca had died from cancer 14 months ago, and since then his life had fallen apart. They couldn't afford the treatment that might have saved her because they had no money and no insurance. After she died, Joseph was left alone with their 7-year-old son Miguel and a mountain of medical debt. Joseph was very poor. He worked construction jobs when he could find them, but the work was irregular. Sometimes he had money for food, sometimes he didn't. He often went to Murphy's Diner in Columbus, Ohio, because he could sit there for hours with just 1 cup of coffee, and the waitress, Martha, never pressured him to leave. On this particular evening, Joseph was sitting in the diner trying to make his coffee last as long as possible. He had maybe $5 left until his next job started, and he wasn't sure when that would be. His son Miguel was staying with their neighbor Mrs. Chun, an elderly woman who helped watch the boy for free, though Joseph always tried to leave her whatever money he could spare. Joseph was exhausted. He was tired of being poor, tired of worrying about money, tired of feeling like a failure because he couldn't provide better for his son. But mostly, he was tired of missing Rebecca. That's when 4 men in expensive suits walked into the diner. Joseph noticed them immediately because they looked completely out of place. Their suits probably cost thousands of dollars. Their shoes were polished and perfect. They moved like they owned everything they saw. Joseph recognized that kind of confidence. It was a confidence of people who had never worried about money, never counted pennies to buy groceries, never had to choose between paying for heat or paying for food. The 4 men scanned the diner, and their attention fixed on a young woman sitting alone in a corner booth. She was small and looked nervous. Her food sat untouched in front of her. The men walked directly to her table. The lead man was tall with slick back hair. He spoke to the woman in a voice that was polite but cold. He told her the table was reserved and she needed to leave immediately. The other 3 men surrounded her booth, blocking her from the rest of the diner. They were intimidating her, and it was working. The woman's shoulders hunched and she made herself smaller, like she was trying to disappear. Joseph watched this happen, and something broke inside him. The woman's posture reminded him of Rebecca. Years ago, when Rebecca's family had confronted her about dating Joseph, she had shrunk into herself the same way. Rebecca's family hadn't approved of Joseph because he was just a poor construction worker with no education and no prospects. They had tried to make her break up with him, using the same kind of quiet intimidation these men were using now. But Rebecca had refused. She had chosen Joseph over her family's money and approval. Her family had cut her off completely after that, but Rebecca had never regretted her choice. Now, watching this young woman being bullied, Joseph felt all his anger and grief and helplessness rise up. He had spent 14 months feeling powerless. Powerless to save his wife, powerless to pay his bills, powerless to give his son a better life. But here, right now, he could do something. He could help this woman. Joseph stood up and walked over to the booth. His heart was pounding, but his hands were steady. He stepped between the man and the woman. "The lady's eating," Joseph said. "She doesn't need to move." The 4 men turned to look at him. The lead man's eyes traveled over Joseph's cheap clothes, his work boots, his paint-stained shirt. The man clearly thought Joseph was nobody important. "This is a private matter," the lead man said. "Move along." "No," Joseph said. That one word changed everything. The atmosphere in the diner became tense. Other customers stopped eating and watched. Martha, the waitress, stopped pouring coffee. Everyone could feel that something serious was happening. The lead man's expression hardened. "Do you have any idea who you're talking to?" he asked. "Don't care," Joseph said. And he meant it. What could these men do to him? He was already at rock bottom. He had nothing left to lose. The lead man threatened Joseph. He said he would make Joseph's life very difficult if Joseph didn't walk away. But Joseph refused. He stood his ground even though he knew these men were dangerous, even though he knew they could hurt him. The young woman stood up and begged Joseph to let her go. She said these men would hurt him and it wasn't worth it. But Joseph said it was worth it. For the first time in 14 months, he felt like he had some control, some power. He was protecting someone who needed help. Martha came over with a baseball bat. The cook came out of the kitchen with a meat tenderizer. Other customers took out their phones and started recording. The four men realized they were being watched and recorded. They couldn't intimidate the woman privately anymore because everyone was paying attention. The lead man told the woman, "This isn't over," and then warned Joseph that he had no idea what he'd just done. Then the four men left the diner. After they were gone, Joseph felt shaky and weak. The adrenaline drained away, and he realized how close he'd come to getting seriously hurt. But he didn't regret it. The young woman thanked Joseph. Then she said something that shocked him. She said those men worked for her family, and she thought Joseph might have known her aunt. Her aunt's name was Rebecca. Joseph couldn't breathe. "What?" he asked. The woman said her name was Elara Vance. She said Rebecca Vance had been her father's older sister. Rebecca had run away from the Vance family 20 years ago to marry a construction worker named Joseph Martinez. The family had disowned Rebecca completely. Joseph felt like the floor was disappearing under his feet. Rebecca had been a Vance? The Vance family was one of the wealthiest families in Ohio. They owned Vance Industries, Vance Real Estate, and dozens of other companies. They were worth billions of dollars. Elara explained that Rebecca had been the eldest daughter and was supposed to inherit part of the family fortune. But she fell in love with Joseph instead. Her father had told her that if she married Joseph, she would be cut off from the family forever. She would get no money, no support, nothing. Rebecca had married Joseph anyway. Joseph's mind was spinning. Rebecca had never told him she came from a wealthy family. They had been so poor throughout their marriage. When Rebecca got sick with cancer, they couldn't afford proper treatment. They had tried everything, loans, credit cards, fundraising, but it wasn't enough. And Rebecca had died. Now Joseph learned that Rebecca's family could have paid for her treatment easily. They were billionaires. But they had chosen not to help. They let their own daughter die rather than forgive her for marrying someone they thought was beneath her. Joseph felt sick. Rebecca had died not because medicine failed, but because her family punished her for choosing love over money. They had killed her through their cruelty and pride. Joseph sat in the booth across from Elara Vance, trying to process what she just told him. His wife Rebecca had come from one of the wealthiest families in Ohio. She had been an heiress to billions of dollars, and she had never told him. "Why?" Joseph asked. "Why didn't she tell me?" Elara wiped tears from her eyes. She explained that she had never met Rebecca because the family refused to talk about her. Elara had found old documents and pieced together Rebecca's story on her own. From what Elara had learned, Rebecca had been kind and genuine. Maybe she hadn't told Joseph about her family's wealth because she wanted him to love her for who she was, not for her money. Or maybe she was afraid that if Joseph knew, he would pressure her to reconcile with her family. Joseph said he would never have done that. But then he wondered, if he had known Rebecca came from billions, if he had known one phone call could pay for her cancer treatment and save her life, would he have swallowed his pride and begged her family for help? Yes, he would have. For Rebecca, he would have done anything. Maybe Rebecca had known that. Maybe she kept silent to protect Joseph from having to make that choice. She protected him from having to humble himself before people who had rejected her. Joseph asked Elara why those men had been harassing her. Elara pulled out her phone and showed Joseph documents, contracts, emails, financial records. She explained that she had been investigating her family for 6 months. She had discovered that the Vance family didn't just build businesses. They destroyed people. Ilera showed Joseph evidence that her family used intimidation and threats to force people to sell their property. They bribed officials, violated safety regulations, and ruined lives to increase their profits. A construction worker had been paralyzed on one of their job sites because they cut corners on safety equipment. The family had paid him a small settlement to keep quiet. Ilera said she had planned to expose all of this. She had a contact at the Columbus Dispatch newspaper who was going to publish her story, but her family found out. They sent those men to bring her back and silence her. Her newspaper contact had canceled their meeting at the last minute, probably because the Vance family had threatened or bribed him. Now Ilera had nowhere to go and no one to help her. Her family had connections everywhere: police, judges, media, politicians. Anyone who tried to help Ilera would become a target. Joseph asked why Ilera was telling him all this. He said he couldn't protect her. He was broke and had no power or connections. He was nobody. Ilera said that Joseph had stood up to 4 dangerous men when they told him to back down. That meant everything. She said Joseph couldn't be bought or intimidated because he had nothing to lose. In today's world of social media, an authentic voice that couldn't be silenced was the most powerful weapon there was. Martha the waitress came over and warned Joseph to be careful. She said those men looked dangerous and the Vance family was powerful. Joseph could get himself killed. Joseph knew Martha was right. He thought about his son Miguel. The last thing Miguel needed was his father getting mixed up in dangerous business with billionaires. Miguel had already lost his mother. He couldn't lose his father too. But Joseph also thought about Rebecca. She had given up everything: her wealth, her family, her inheritance, to be with him. She had faced her family's rejection with courage. If Joseph walked away now, he would be dishonoring her memory. And what would that teach Miguel? That you only help people when it's convenient? That you only stand up for what's right when it's safe? Joseph told Ilera he wouldn't walk away. His wife had given up everything for him. The least he could do was help her niece. Besides, the men had threatened to ruin his life, but his life was already ruined. He had nothing left to lose. Ilera cried and thanked him. Joseph said not to thank him yet, because he had no idea how to actually help. But Ilera said Joseph had something valuable. He was authentic and couldn't be bought. That mattered. Ilera said she needed somewhere safe to stay. Her family knew her apartment, her car, her friends. They would be watching everything. Joseph offered to let her stay at his apartment. It was tiny and cramped, but she could sleep on the couch. They left the diner and got into Joseph's old truck. The truck was falling apart, more rust than metal, with a heater that barely worked. As Joseph drove to his apartment, he kept checking the mirrors, worried they were being followed. Ilera warned Joseph that her family would come after him now. They would try to intimidate him or buy him off. If that didn't work, they would destroy him. They would dig into his past, find every mistake he'd ever made, and use it against him. They would make him look like a criminal or a bad father. They might even call child services and try to take Miguel away. Joseph's blood went cold at that thought, but he said they would face it together. The truth needed to be told, even if it cost him everything. When they arrived at Joseph's apartment building, it was run down and in a poor neighborhood, but Ilera didn't complain. Joseph went to Mrs. Chen's apartment to pick up Miguel. Mrs. Chen took one look at Ilera and immediately understood that something was wrong. Mrs. Chen insisted that Ilera stay with her instead of on Joseph's couch. She said she had a guest room, and Ilera would be more comfortable there. Joseph tried to argue, but Mrs. Chen wouldn't hear it. She said she chose to help, just like Joseph had chosen to help Ilera. Joseph carried his sleeping son Miguel back to their apartment. Miguel mumbled, "Love you, Papa," and Joseph's heart clenched. Whatever happened next, he had to keep his son safe. After putting Miguel to bed, Joseph looked out the window and saw a black car parked across the street. Its engine was running, but its lights were off. Someone was sitting inside, watching the building. They had been followed. The Vance family knew where Joseph lived. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My father said I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show him that these tales matter. Please subscribe to my channel, and let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay silent. Now, let's continue. Joseph stayed awake all night watching the black car through his window. It didn't move. The person inside just sat there, a silent reminder that the Vance family was watching him. At dawn, the car finally left. Joseph made instant coffee and tried to figure out what to do. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You made a mistake last night. Walk away now and we'll forget it happened. Keep interfering and you'll regret it." Joseph deleted the text and checked on Alara. Mrs. Chun texted back that Alara was safe and eating breakfast. Joseph woke Miguel and got him ready for school. He made breakfast from the last of their food and walked Miguel to the bus stop. After Miguel left safely, Joseph went to Mrs. Chen's apartment. Alara looked exhausted, but she had showered and was wearing clothes Mrs. Chun had lent her. She told Joseph she had been thinking about how to expose her family. She couldn't just send documents to a newspaper anymore because her family had too much control over the media. Instead, she needed to go public in a way they couldn't suppress. Alara said she would do a live stream on social media. She would tell her story, show the documents, and name names. Once it was on the internet, it would be there forever. The Vance family couldn't erase it. And if enough people saw it and it went viral, then Alara and Joseph would have protection through visibility. The family couldn't make them disappear if everyone was watching. Mrs. Chun said it was dangerous but necessary. Alara agreed it was dangerous. Then she said she needed to show Joseph something she'd found while researching Rebecca. Alara showed Joseph an old photograph on her laptop. It was Rebecca as a young woman, standing in front of a huge mansion with columns and balconies and beautiful gardens. A man in a suit stood next to her. Alara explained the man was her father, Marcus Vance, and the mansion was the Vance family estate where Rebecca had grown up. Joseph stared at the photo. This was the world Rebecca had left behind. This was what she had given up to be with him. Then Alara showed Joseph a legal document. It was a trust fund that had been set up for Rebecca when she turned 18. The trust was worth $5 million. It was supposed to be hers when she turned 25 or when she got married, whichever came first. But there was a clause. If Rebecca married someone the family didn't approve of, she would forfeit the trust. The money would go back to the family. And that's exactly what had happened. When Rebecca married Joseph, she lost everything. Joseph felt tears running down his face. Rebecca had chosen him over $5 million. She had known exactly what she was giving up, and she had chosen him anyway. But then Alara showed him something else. Another document. This one dated 7 years ago, around the time Miguel was born. It was a memo from Rebecca's father to his lawyers. The memo said that investigators had found Rebecca and confirmed she had a son. The memo discussed whether they should reach out to Rebecca now that she had given them a grandson. The lawyers had advised against it. They said Rebecca had made her choice, and reaching out would set a bad precedent. It might encourage other family members to think they could leave and then come back when they needed money. The memo ended with Rebecca's father agreeing. He wrote, "Let her live with her choice." Joseph felt rage boiling up inside him. The Vance family had known Rebecca was alive. They had known she had a son, their own grandson, and they had deliberately chosen not to help, not to reach out, not to care. Then Alara showed him one final document. This one was dated 14 months ago, right when Rebecca was dying of cancer. It was another memo. The investigators had informed the family that Rebecca was sick and dying. They had found out she was trying to raise money for treatment and failing. The memo discussed whether the family should help. The lawyer said helping might expose them to lawsuits or claims on the estate. Rebecca's father had written one sentence in response. She made her bed. Let her lie in it. They had known Rebecca was dying. They could have saved her life with a fraction of their wealth. And they had chosen to let her die. Joseph couldn't speak. He couldn't breathe. The grief and rage were too much. Rebecca had died because her family was cruel. His son had lost his mother because billionaires cared more about their pride than about human life. Mrs. Chin put her hand on Joseph's shoulder. She didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. After a long silence, Joseph looked at Alara. "Show me everything," he said. "Every document, every email, every piece of evidence you have. I want the world to know what your family did. I want everyone to know they murdered my wife. Ilera nodded. There's one more thing, she said quietly. The trust fund that Aunt Rebecca forfeited when she married you? According to the terms, if Rebecca died without reconciling with the family, the money was supposed to go to her children. That means, Miguel, your son is entitled to $5 million plus interest. It's probably worth close to $8 million now. Joseph's head spun. Miguel was a millionaire? His son, who wore shoes that were too small because they couldn't afford new ones, had millions of dollars that was legally his? But my family will never give it to him, Ilera said. They'll fight it in court for years. They'll claim the trust is invalid, or that Miguel isn't really Rebecca's son. They'll do everything they can to keep that money. Unless what? Joseph asked. Unless we expose them so publicly that they have no choice, Ilera said. If the whole world knows they're trying to cheat a 7-year-old orphan out of his inheritance, the pressure will be too much. They'll have to pay him just to make the bad publicity go away. Joseph thought about it. $8 million would change Miguel's life. He could go to any college he wanted. He could have opportunities Joseph never dreamed of. He could escape the poverty that had trapped Joseph his whole life. But getting that money meant going to war with billionaires. It meant putting a target on his back. It meant risking everything. Joseph looked at the photo of Rebecca, standing in front of the mansion. She had risked everything for love. She had been brave. He needed to be brave, too. Let's do it, Joseph said. Let's burn them down. Over the next 3 days, Ilera and Joseph prepared for the live stream. Ilera organized all her documents and evidence. She wrote out her statement. Joseph told her everything he knew about Rebecca's final days, how they had tried desperately to raise money for treatment, how Rebecca had suffered, how she had died in pain because they couldn't afford better care. Joseph took time off from a construction job, using up the little savings he had left. He knew he might lose the job entirely, but it didn't matter anymore. This was more important. They decided to do the live stream from Mrs. Chen's apartment because it felt safer than Joseph's place. Mrs. Chen said she would watch Miguel during the broadcast to keep him away from it. Joseph agreed. Miguel was too young to hear these details about his mother's family. The night before the live stream, Joseph couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about what might happen. The Vance family would retaliate. They might try to hurt him. They might try to take Miguel away. But they might also be forced to finally do the right thing and give Miguel his inheritance. The next morning, Joseph got Miguel ready for school like normal. He hugged his son extra tight before the bus came. I love you, Mijo, Joseph said. No matter what happens, remember that I love you and your mama loved you. We both wanted the best for you. Miguel looked confused. Pop, are you okay? I'm fine, Joseph said, just feeling sentimental. Go on, you'll miss the bus. After Miguel left, Joseph went to Mrs. Chen's apartment. Ilera had set up a camera and lighting. She had posted announcements on social media the night before, saying she was going to expose corruption in one of Ohio's most powerful families. Thousands of people had said they would watch. At exactly noon, Ilera started the live stream. Within minutes, hundreds of people were watching, then thousands. The number kept climbing. Ilera introduced herself. She said she was Ilera Vance, daughter of Marcus Vance, member of one of the wealthiest families in Ohio, and she was about to expose her family's crimes. For 30 minutes, Ilera laid out the evidence. She showed documents proving her family had bribed officials, intimidated residents, violated safety regulations, and destroyed lives to increase their profits. She named names. She showed financial records. She held nothing back. Then she told Rebecca's story. Ilera explained that 20 years ago, her Aunt Rebecca had fallen in love with a good man named Joseph Martinez. Rebecca's family had told her to break up with Joseph or be disowned. Rebecca had chosen love. The family had cut her off completely, taken away the $5 million trust fund that was supposed to be hers. Ilera showed the documents, the trust agreement, the memos, everything. She told how the family had known Rebecca was sick and dying, how they could have saved her life, how they had deliberately chosen not to help. My aunt died because my family cared more about pride than about human life, Ilera said, crying. She died in pain and poverty because billionaires couldn't stand the idea that she had chosen her own path. And now they're trying to cheat her 7-year-old son out of the inheritance that's legally his. Then Joseph stepped in front of the camera. He hadn't planned to speak, but suddenly he needed to. He needed people to understand what the Vance family had taken from him. "My name is Joseph Martinez," he said. His voice was rough with emotion. "Rebecca was my wife. She was the best person I ever knew. She was kind and brave, and she made me believe I was worth something even though I was just a poor construction worker. She gave me a beautiful son. And then she got sick." Joseph's voice broke. "We tried everything to save her. We maxed out credit cards. We borrowed from friends. We set up fundraisers. But it wasn't enough. The treatment she needed cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. We didn't have it. So I had to watch my wife die. I had to hold her hand while the cancer ate through her body. I had to explain to my 7-year-old son why his mama wasn't coming home." Tears streamed down Joseph's face. "And now I learned that Rebecca's family could save her with pocket change. They knew she was dying, and they let it happen. They murdered my wife through their cruelty." The live stream counter showed 50,000 people watching, then 100,000. The numbers kept climbing. Joseph looked directly into the camera. "Miguel Martinez is 7 years old. He wears shoes that are too small because I can't afford new ones. He eats cereal for dinner sometimes because that's all we have. His mother died because we were poor. But he's not poor. He has an $8 million trust fund that the Vance family is illegally withholding. I'm asking everyone watching this, don't let them get away with it. Don't let them cheat an orphan. Hold them accountable." The stream ended. Alara and Joseph sat in silence, emotionally drained. Then Alara's phone started buzzing. Social media was exploding. The video was being shared everywhere. News outlets were picking up the story. Hashtag Justice for Rebecca was trending on Twitter. Hashtag Pay Miguel was trending too. Within hours, reporters were calling. News vans showed up outside the apartment building. The story was going viral nationally. People were outraged at billionaires that let a woman die and were now trying to cheat her child. The Vance family tried to do damage control. They released a statement saying the trust fund issue was a complex legal matter and they were reviewing the situation. But the public wasn't buying it. The pressure was enormous. 3 days after the live stream, the Vance family's lawyers called Alara. They wanted to negotiate. A week later, Joseph sat in a fancy conference room in downtown Columbus, the kind of place he never would have been allowed in before. Across the table sat 5 lawyers representing the Vance family. Alara sat next to Joseph. They had hired their own lawyer, paid for by a legal aid group that offered to help after seeing the viral video. The Vance lawyers made their offer. They would give Miguel his trust fund, $8 million, plus an additional $2 million in compensation for the family's failure to provide support during Rebecca's illness. $10 million total. In exchange, Joseph and Alara had to sign non-disclosure agreements. They couldn't talk about the family anymore. The other evidence Alara had gathered, the bribes, the safety violations, all of it had to disappear. The Vance family wanted to make this problem go away. Joseph looked at Alara. They had talked about this possibility. $10 million would change Miguel's life forever. He would never have to struggle like Joseph had struggled. He could have every opportunity. But accepting the money meant letting the Vance family off the hook for all their other crimes. It meant justice for Rebecca, but not for construction workers who'd been paralyzed, or the families who'd been forced from their homes, or any of the other people Vance had hurt. "No," Alara said firmly. The lawyers looked shocked. "No," one of them repeated. "We'll take the $8 million that's legally Miguel's." Alara said, "That's his inheritance, and you have no right to keep it. But we're not taking hush money. And we're not signing any non-disclosure agreement. The other evidence I have, I'm turning it over to the FBI and the state attorney general. Your family committed crimes. You should face consequences." The lawyers sputtered and threatened. They said Alara was making a mistake. They said the family would make her life hell. But Joseph smiled because he realized something. The Vance family wasn't all-powerful anymore. The viral video had taken away their ability to operate in the shadows. Everyone was watching now. They couldn't make Alara or Joseph disappear without causing a huge scandal. In the end, the lawyers agreed. Miguel would get his $8 million trust fund with no strings attached, and Alara would cooperate with federal investigators looking into the Vance family's business practices. 2 months later, Joseph sat in his new apartment. Not a mansion, just a modest 2-bedroom in a safe neighborhood with good schools. Miguel's trust fund was being managed by an independent trustee. Joseph couldn't touch it until Miguel turned 18, except for expenses related to Miguel's education and welfare. That was fine with Joseph. He didn't want the money. He just wanted his son to have a future. Joseph had gotten a better job, too. The publicity from the viral video had led to interview requests, and one of those interviews had been seen by a construction company owner who was impressed by Joseph's honesty and integrity. He had offered Joseph a foreman position with actual benefits and a salary. Miguel was thriving. He had new shoes that fit. He ate regular meals. He was seeing a therapist to help him process his mother's death. He was just starting to laugh again, to be a kid again. Alara came over for dinner at least once a week. She had been estranged from her family officially now, but she didn't seem sad about it. She was working with investigators and writing a book about her family's corruption. She said it felt good to finally be free to tell the truth. Mrs. Chun came over too. Joseph had tried to give her money to thank her for all her help, but she had refused. "You helped someone who needed help," she had said. "That's payment enough." One evening, after dinner, Miguel asked Joseph about his mother. "Papa, was Mama rich?" Miguel asked. Joseph thought about how to answer. "Your mama's family had money," he said carefully. "But your mama chose to leave that behind. She chose love instead. She chose us. Do you think she was happy?" Miguel asked. "Even though we were poor?" Joseph felt tears in his eyes. "Yes, Mijo. I think she was very happy. Because she got to be with the people she loved. Money doesn't make you happy. Love does." Miguel nodded. Then he said, "I miss her." "Me too," Joseph said, pulling his son close. "Every day, but she's still with us. Every time you're brave, every time you help someone who needs help, every time you choose to be kind, that's your mama living through you." That night, after Miguel went to bed, Joseph sat alone in the living room. He looked at a photo of Rebecca that he kept on the mantle. In the picture, she was laughing, her eyes bright with joy. This photo had been taken about a year before she got sick at Miguel's birthday party. They had been so poor they could barely afford a cake. But Rebecca had been radiant with happiness. "We did it, mi amor," Joseph whispered to the photo. "Your son is going to be okay. He's going to have opportunities we never dreamed of. And the world knows what your family did. They can't hide anymore." Joseph thought about the last few months. His life had completely transformed. He'd gone from a broke, grieving widower to someone with financial stability, meaningful work, and purpose. Miguel's future was secure. Alara had found family in Joseph and Miguel after losing her own. And the Vance family was finally facing consequences for their actions. Federal investigators were building cases, and several family members might face criminal charges. But the biggest change wasn't the money or the publicity or the justice. The biggest change was that Joseph no longer felt powerless. He had learned that even when you have nothing, no money, no connections, no power, you still have the ability to make a difference. You still have the ability to stand up for what's right. That night in the diner, when he'd stood between those men and Alara, he'd done it because it was right. He hadn't known it would lead to all this. He'd just known that someone needed help, and he could help them. Rebecca had taught him that. She had given up everything because she believed love and integrity mattered more than money. She had been right. Joseph looked at her photo one more time. "Thank you," he whispered, "for everything, for loving me, for giving me Miguel, for teaching me to be brave. I promise I'll teach our son the same lessons. He'll know that his mama was a hero, and he'll grow up knowing that doing the right thing, even when it's hard, is what matters most." Outside, the city lights twinkled in the darkness. Somewhere out there, other people were struggling like Joseph had struggled, Other people were feeling powerless and invisible. But maybe Joseph thought they would remember his story. Maybe they would remember that one person standing up can make a difference. Maybe they would find the courage to be brave too. Joseph turned off the light and went to bed. Tomorrow he would wake up, make Miguel breakfast, take him to school, and go to work. It would be a normal day. And that was perfect, because normal, for Joseph Miguel, finally meant safe and stable and hopeful. The story could have ended in tragedy. A poor man crushed by billionaires, an orphan cheated out of his inheritance, corruption continuing unchecked. But instead, it ended with justice, with healing, and with hope. All because one tire construction worker in a diner had looked at someone being bullied and decided to say one simple word. No, that word had changed everything. So here's the real question. Did you subscribe yet? Thousands of people will listen to this story and won't subscribe. Please don't be that person. Kindly support what I do here by subscribing, and then drop in the comment section if you would like part 2.